Russia's hybrid warfare tactics are getting out of control. President Vladimir Putin is ordering his shadow fleet to target the vital undersea cables that help NATO's allies with everything from communication to power. Now, Putin's enemies are fighting back. Poland just forced a Russian shadow ship to retreat after it spent too long lingering near a key NATO cable. Poland's move stopped Putin's ship dead in its tracks, forcing a humiliating retreat for Russia. But this is only the beginning, and what's going on here could be the start of a larger conflict that's been brewing between Poland and Russia for some time. On May 21, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced that he'd been forced to send a military vessel to intervene against a Russian ship that was acting suspiciously near Polish waters. That ship, said Tusk, was one of the many that's meant to be secured in a Russian port due to being under the effect of sanctions from the European Union. Instead, it somehow found its way into Polish waters, where it began acting suspiciously. And that's not all. Poland found the ship acting so strangely right above a key undersea cable that connects Poland to Sweden. In a statement posted to X, Tusk outlined the entire episode. After claiming that the ship was performing suspicious maneuvers, Tusk said, "After a successful intervention by our military, the ship sailed off to one of the Russian ports. Poland deployed the ORP Heweliusz to confront the shadowy Russian ship. Putin's vessel had no choice. Unequipped to deal with the Polish warship, all it could do was turn tail and flee." More details about the ship came from a report in the Moscow Times. It says that Poland identified the ship as an oil tanker named Sun, and that it wasn't sailing under the Russian flag. Instead, the tanker was moving under an Antiguan flag. That seems strange until it becomes clear that the archipelagic country of Antigua and Barbuda is one of the few nations that maintain somewhat stable diplomatic relations with Russia since Putin invaded Ukraine. Russia and Antigua and Barbuda signed the agreement on the foundations of relations between the two countries in June 2021, setting the stage for stronger diplomatic ties and a developing trade relationship. Russia is taking advantage of that relationship. According to Poland, it's sailing ships under the Antiguan flag to hide the fact that those ships are Russian vessels bent on skirting sanctions and causing problems for NATO members. One big reason why Poland's interception matters is that Russia's shadow ship was spending far too much time above that key undersea cable linking Russia and Sweden. That cable connects Poland's northern territory of Utska with the Swedish coast near Karlshamn. Over 600 megawatts of electricity flow through that cable, and it allows both the Polish and Swedish national grids to rely on cross-border supplies of electricity that are cheaper than electricity supplied via other systems. Speaking to the media after Poland sent its ship, the country's defense minister, Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, had this to say: "This shows how dangerous the times we live in are, how serious the situation in the Baltic Sea is. Since Sweden and Finland joined the North Atlantic Alliance, the Baltic Sea has become a key marine area where the largest number of incidents occur, the most common incidents related to cable breaks and sabotage." He's not wrong. Russia's latest intrusion into Baltic waters is just the most recent in a long-running series of hybrid warfare tactics it's been using against NATO-aligned nations in the Baltic Sea and beyond. The modus operandi is simple. Putin deploys one of Russia's shadow fleet ships, or in some cases, a recognized military ship in the Baltic waters. That ship tries to hide itself away from anything that could detect its presence while conducting some sort of shady activity. Typically, that involves loitering over undersea cables, with the ship either using undersea technology to determine where that cable is for future sabotage efforts, or engaging in the sabotage itself. Poland has had enough. It's promising a firm response from both itself and NATO if Russia conducts any sort of attack on Baltic Sea infrastructure. However, neither Sweden nor Russia has commented on the incident. The reason is obvious when it comes to Russia. Any comment that it makes beyond an outright refusal that one of its shadow ships was just sent packing would amount to admitting that the ship was there in the first place. Putin can't do that. The entire point is to operate in secret. So it's better to stay silent than issue a denial that would end up being proof of his actions. Sweden staying quiet is a little stranger. It may be relying on Poland to do all of the talking for it, or Sweden may want to hold fire on a comment until it's had a chance to confirm the incident itself. Regardless, Poland is making its collective voice heard, and it has good reason to do so. What was seen on May 21 is far from the only time that Russia has caused problems either inside Poland or in the Baltic Sea. Starting with Poland, it's been subject to Russia's hybrid warfare tactics ever since it proclaimed its support for Ukraine in Putin's ill-fated invasion. The most obvious and most dangerous of those hybrid warfare incidents occurred back in May 2024. In that month, a Warsaw-based shopping centre was engulfed in a catastrophic fire that took Poland several days to put out. By the time the flames were eventually quelled, they claimed 1,400 small businesses, many of which belonged to or were staffed by Warsaw's Vietnamese community. This showcases the intelligence with which Russia conducts its hybrid warfare. It's likely this specific mall was targeted because of its heavy Vietnamese contingent. That offered Russia plausible deniability. It could claim that the fire was caused by people in Poland who are unhappy about the presence of Vietnamese people in their country, thus sowing the seeds of racial discontent where none previously existed. Perhaps that was Russia's plan. If it was, then the plan failed. Poland knows precisely who was behind the devastating arson, as its Minister of Foreign Affairs, Radek Sikorski, confirmed to the BBC on May 12, a year after the fire broke out.
We have evidence that they commissioned people living in Poland, recruited them on Telegram, and paid them to set fire to this huge shopping mall. And it was by miracle that nobody was hurt. But this is completely unacceptable.
Sikorski added that this was further evidence, if any more were needed, that Russia's influence inside Poland needs to be further curtailed. If it isn't, more hybrid warfare tactics like this terrible arson might be seen in the future. This matters in the context of Poland's recent interception of one of Russia's shadow ships for a simple reason. It shows that Putin is willing to use others to do his dirty work. In the case of the arson, Russia hired discontented Polish people to set the fire, allowing Russia to wash its hands of the blame that should have come its way. The same strategy can be observed in the Baltic Sea on May 21. Rather than sending a Russian ship into the sea, Putin is either using a ship registered in Antigua and Barbuda or is sending a Russian ship under an Antiguan flag to make it seem like Russia isn't involved. It's a paper-thin ruse that's easy to see through, but Russia still uses it to avoid taking any responsibility for its actions. And speaking of the Black Sea, it was mentioned earlier that what happened on May 21 is far from the first time that Russia has been caught getting up to no good in those NATO-controlled waters. And there are other incidents, many. MarineLink posted a timeline of these Baltic incidents in January 2025. Rewind to September 2022, and there was the damage to the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines to consider. Built to pump Russian gas into Germany, these pipelines were still vital to Europe during the early months of Putin's invasion, when Europe was scrambling to find alternatives to Russian gas. Putin knew this. On September 26, it's believed that his forces were responsible for several subsea blasts, which occurred about 17 hours apart, that ruptured 3 out of the 4 pipelines in the Nord Stream system. Beyond releasing clouds of dangerous methane into the air, these blasts cut off the pipelines for several days until repairs could be carried out. A later investigation by Swedish authorities found traces of explosives on several objects recovered from the damaged sites, suggesting that the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines was a very deliberate act. Nobody accused Russia directly of the attack. Russia certainly didn't claim responsibility, but the most likely explanation for the incident is that Russia sabotaged its own pipelines in an effort to hurt Germany and other European nations that are backing Ukraine. An interesting coda to this story, August 2024 saw Germany ask Poland to arrest a Ukrainian diving instructor believed to be responsible for at least one of the blasts. Poland tried but failed. The instructor had already left Poland before he could be detained. This is the whiff of a familiar modus operandi, or MO here. Just as with the Polish shopping mall fire and the May 21 Baltic Sea incident, a non-Russian is responsible for something that benefits Putin. Now, using the Wilson Center's timeline, it says that October 8, 2023 saw the Baltic Connector gas pipeline, which connects Finland and Estonia, get ruptured during the dead of night. This time, it was a Chinese flag container ship named the New Polar Bear that was detected in Baltic Sea waters on the eve of the attack. Again, this is Putin's MO at play. A non-Russian ship, or at least a Russian ship flying under the flag of another nation, just so happened to be in the area of a vital subsea cable that got destroyed. In this case, China later admitted that its ship was at fault for severing the gas pipeline, though it claims that the incident was unintentional. That's difficult to believe. China has been providing vital materials to Russia since the Ukraine war began, ranging from rare earth minerals to dual-use components that can be used to build Russian weapons. It does all of this while maintaining a facade of neutrality. It seems likely that Russia and China colluded in the October 2023 sabotage. Fast forward to November 2024, and Russia switched its focus from energy pipelines to undersea communications cables. Sometime between November 17 and November 18, a pair of undersea cables located about 100 nautical miles apart in the Baltic Sea were severed almost simultaneously. One of those cables was a 135-mile internet link between Sweden and Lithuania. The other connected Finland to Germany. Guess what an investigation into the incident uncovered? Another shadowy ship, again sailing under a Chinese flag, was likely responsible for the sabotage. This time, investigators zeroed in on a bulk carrier named Yipeng 3, which left the Russian port of Ust-Luga just 2 days before the cables were severed. Coordinates pulled from marine traffic data showed that the Chinese ship was sailing in the vicinity of the cables at the time they were severed. It took more than a month for China to allow representatives from Sweden, Germany, Denmark and Finland to board the Yipeng 3 after the incident, which is more than enough time to discard any evidence. As of December 2024, China still hadn't allowed a Swedish prosecutor to board the ship to conduct a preliminary investigation. There's still more. On December 25, 2024, the S-Link 2 cable that links Finland and Estonia was severed. An oil tanker named Eagle S, flying under the flag of the Cook Islands, is believed to be the culprit. January 26 saw a massive undersea TV and radio cable connecting Sweden and Latvia get severed. This time, 2 ships were suspected, the Vesent sailing under Malta's flag and the Silver Dania, which sails under Norway's flag but is operated by a Russian crew. This time the investigation was dropped for a lack of evidence, but Russia's MO still seems to be at play. That incident was accompanied by a report from the same day in which a disturbance along the Sea Line 1 submarine cable connecting Finland and Germany was recorded. This time, the damage wasn't enough to knock the cable out of commission, as evidenced by the sabotage only being detected in February. Still, it was yet another Russian attempt to hurt NATO. That leads back to May 21 and Poland forcing a Russian shadow ship to turn tail and run. That incident doesn't appear to have led to any cable damage, but it's indicative of a hybrid warfare tactic Putin has been using for at least 2 years. He sends ships into Baltic waters, usually flying under the flag of another nation. Those ships loiter above subsea cables right around the time that those cables get damaged. Then Russia denies all responsibility as Putin sits back and enjoys the havoc he's wrought. There's a clear pattern. This time it looks like Poland detected the Russian shadow ship before it could complete the sabotage aspect of its plan. There have been several mentions of Russian shadow ships throughout this video. Those ships are part of an entire fleet of secret vessels Russia is using for all sorts of reasons. As Brookings explained, Russia's shadow fleet emerged in the wake of the Group of 7 nations, alongside Australia, placing a cap on Russian energy prices back in December 2022. That cap was a direct response to Putin's invasion of Ukraine and was designed to limit the amount of revenue Putin could generate for his war. The Shadow Fleet began life as a way for Russia to skirt around these sanctions. Russia uses shadow ships, typically flying under another nation's flag, to sell its oil at higher prices than sanctions allow. Several shady tactics go into keeping this fleet running, including ship-to-ship transfers of oil to prevent it from being tracked and blending oil from several countries into one shipment to hide its true origins. Russia even goes so far as to spoof ship location data and is now buying aging ships from different companies to reinforce its shadow fleet. And Putin is spending a lot to keep this fleet running. Since 2022, he's plowed around $10 billion into buying older ships he can use to skirt sanctions. Worst of all, around 60% of the ships Russia is buying were previously owned by Western European countries and companies. There's been an explosion of these types of ships since Putin invaded Ukraine. Before the war, only 6% of ships tracked were defined as shadow ships, which are ships that seem to have no clear beneficial owner. Now the number is closer to 35%, with 75 of the 183 Russian-controlled ships the US has sanctioned identified as part of the Shadow Fleet. The Baltic Sea sabotage efforts, including the most recent May 21 attempt, are being conducted by these shadow ships. That shows us that Putin has found another use for them. What started as an effort to avoid sanctions has evolved into Russia realizing that the tactics it uses to hide its shadow ships from view are perfect for subterfuge. The Sun flying under an Antiguan flag means nothing. It's an old tanker, the ideal ship for Putin's shadow fleet. In short, Russia is essentially building a second navy. In the militaristic sense, that navy isn't the type to go to war. That's why the Sun didn't attempt to confront the vessel Poland sent out to respond to its presence in the Baltic Sea. However, those ships have anchors, they can carry explosives and host divers who can swim toward undersea cables. All of these tactics are being used by Russia to sabotage the vital undersea cables that NATO-aligned nations rely on for gas, electricity and communications. Now, Russia is targeting Poland with its shadow ships. Why? There are several reasons why Russia targeted a vital Polish cable on May 21, starting with Poland's decision to close the Russian consulate in Krakow as a direct response to the shopping mall arson incident mentioned earlier. That consulate was closed on May 12 amidst the announcement that Poland was also going to be charging 2 Ukrainian citizens in connection with the arson. Russia isn't happy about that closure. Putin's mouthpiece, Dmitry Peskov, says that Poland's arson accusations are groundless and an example of Poland's increasing anti-Russia sentiment. Poland is choosing hostility against us, Peskov claimed, while adding that the consulate closure will also damage bilateral relations between Poland and Russia that he says are already in a deplorable state. The move follows on from another Russian consulate closure in 2024, leaving just one consulate left over in Poland. Of course, Peskov's claims of Poland growing hostile toward Russia ignore incidents like the arson and the May 21 shadow ship incident. But he also isn't wrong. Poland is indeed becoming more hostile to Russia because it believes that Putin's marauding forces in Ukraine represent a threat to Poland's national security. That leads to the second reason why Russia just targeted a Polish undersea cable. Poland is getting stronger and Putin doesn't like it. Back in November 2024, Prime Minister Tusk noted that the Ukraine war was entering a decisive phase, and more importantly from the perspective of relations between Poland and Russia, that the threat of a global conflict is both serious and real. Tusk's statements came after Putin announced changes to Russia's nuclear doctrine that essentially allow it to strike any nation that aids another country in threatening Russia's sovereignty. The translation is simple. Poland views Russia as a major threat both now and after the Ukraine war, and it's responding to that threat. Over the last couple of years, Poland has evolved to become one of Europe's leading military powers. In 2024, it allocated 4.12% of its gross domestic product, or GDP, to defense spending. That's over 2% more than NATO's recommended 2% of GDP spending. In 2025, Poland will spend even more, hitting 4.7% of GDP dedicated to defense. The country's armed forces are now the third largest in NATO, having grown from the 9th largest in 2014. And in real terms, it's spending $35 billion annually on defense. In Europe and among its NATO allies, Poland's military spending is only beaten by Germany, France and the UK. The country has bought hundreds of tanks, rocket systems and howitzers since 2022, most of them coming from the US. It's also more than doubled its active military personnel over the last decade. Poland has gone from having a standing army of 99,000 to one of 216,000 people. And speaking of people, the anti-Russian sentiment Peskov describes extends beyond the Polish armed forces and into its everyday citizens. On May 2nd, the BBC ran an article noting that many everyday Poles are taking part in firearms training even if they're not actively signing up to the country's military. One army trainer named Captain Adam Sielicki operates a shooting range where he's teaching men, women, children and even pensioners how to survive an armed attack. "The times are dangerous now. We need to be ready," said Sielicki. "We have a military threat from Russia and we're preparing for this." Sielicki's program is already oversubscribed, and that, in a nutshell, highlights the general sentiment toward Russia inside Poland. The Polish people, along with the country's government and military, view Russia as a threat. Don't forget that Poland was also one of many nations that fell under the Soviet yoke in the past. It's watching what's happening in Ukraine, and it's wary of Putin turning his eye toward Poland if his invasion of Ukraine succeeds. This, perhaps more than anything else, explains why a Russian shadow ship was floating above a key Polish undersea cable on May 21. Putin isn't going to start a direct fight with Poland, at least not yet, but as he prepares for what may be a future invasion, he's happy to engage in hybrid warfare tactics that damage Poland and its NATO allies. Poland caught him in the act this time. But how many more of these types of incidents are going to be seen now that Russia and Poland seem to be on an inescapable collision course with one another? Let us know what you think the answer to that question might be in the comments, along with sharing your thoughts about the Russian shadow ship that was just caught in Polish waters. And remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more videos covering the latest military developments in Europe, the Middle East, and around the globe.